Hey family, welcome to the Recalibrate podcast. It's your host Esther Glory, and this is a new episode. I know it has been a while since I have been with you all, but I am so excited to be back here giving you guys my 2022 faith reflections. And so, no, we're not going to break our usual traditions. We are going to jump right in with the random musing of my heart. And the random musing of my heart for this end of year episode is that everything that you experience this year, find value in it by finding a lesson. And I know that for some of us, 2022 was the ghetto. I could tell you that for free for me anyway, but definitely one of my biggest what's the word, encouragements to you would be look for the lesson in it all. I know that for some of us it was tumultuous. For some of us it was the best year of our lives. I've heard varying degrees of things from different people, but I think finding the lesson in it all, if you succeeded, if this was the greatest year of your life, then what were the lessons? What were the things that you can take away from such a successful year full of wins? If it was a year for you where it was L after L after L, it wasn't so great, it was actually probably one of the worst years of your life. What were the lessons? What were the lessons? Not in a way of eradicating how you truly feel about the year that you've had, but in terms of a way of making sure that you grow and you continue to develop even when life has handed you some hard things. And I'm not saying this from a place of um kind of not understanding how hard that can be. I was saying today, in a conversation, I was saying that I never want to lose the tenderness of my heart. Everything that I've experienced this year, whether it be grief, whether it be loss, bereavement, disappointment, discouragement, betrayal, just all kinds of like really negative things. When you experience these things, sometimes the emotion and what you're experiencing, the feeling of what you're going through, can sometimes be overwhelming. And for me, I never want to lose my ability to feel my way through certain things and to actually feel justified in what I feel. But I always try to take at least one lesson so that it doesn't make my heart hard towards life, towards people, so I don't become hard-hearted and miserable, even to myself or towards God. And so I would encourage you to find a lesson. If that's the only thing that keeps your heart tender, find a lesson in order to be able to go through and to grow through the things that you may be experiencing. So that's a random musing of my heart for this week's episode. Let's dive right in. So we are going to be talking about my faith reflections this year. Now, we had a time this year, I'll tell you that much. And so even with like my sabbatical, which was a lot longer than I had anticipated, I still wanted to be really intentional about resting and rejuvenating for whatever we did next here at Recalibrate. And that stretched to me having to grow myself so that whatever I was sharing on here, whatever I was like sharing and having a conversation with you all about, I was living in and growing through before I presented it to you all, because I didn't want it to be something that I'm saying and not living. And so yes, season 5 will be starting in 2023, and we will be talking all about stewardship. We'll be talking about life stewardship. This will be discipleship, basically. And as always, it will be a community thing that we're doing together. But yeah, so that there are things that I have learned this year outside of faith, in my faith. But I'm going to be sharing with you probably my 3 out of the many that I have learned this year. And also, when this episode goes live as well, I'll share on the stories that maybe a box about what you've learned this year in your faith as well. And let's have a conversation about it. So if you're not already, go and follow at the Recalibrate podcast on Instagram, because that's where we have all our conversations and we kind of chop it up as a community right now anyway. So yeah, lesson number 1. Lesson number 1, I've probably said it on the podcast before, but I've never lived it out more than I had to this year. But principle number 1, or lesson number 1, is that your decision making is also worship to God. Your decision making is also worship to God. Now, what do I mean? What am I trying to say? One of the things that I learned this year is that We often teach worship about lifestyle, about beholding God, all of which are true. And also, every decision that I make either glorifies God or doesn't. And putting it that plainly has taught me a lot about myself, but also learning things in the way that God desired for me to learn them. So this all sounds really parabolic. Let me kind of be clear with what I'm saying. So, for example, if because of trauma you've learned empathy or people skills in the wrong way or in the wrong dynamic, sometimes that can kind of make you um be expressing the right thing but in the wrong way. So for example, I learned empathy wrong. So I learned empathy in terms of stepping into the shoes of a person, feeling what they may be feeling and being there for them and responding to every crisis and every call and being available to them and people pleasing and watching their every observing every movement or every emotion and how they move between moods because of trauma. And so I learned empathy wrong to the point where in in being empathetic, I denied how being there for that person may make me experience that person, whether it be in a negative or positive way, and also in a way of not sacrificing self to be empathetic to somebody else and their situation. And because I learned empathy wrong, my expression of empathy was wrong. And now I've been learning through therapy as well. You guys know I advocate for therapy. Do it, do it, do it. If you can, put the money down and do the therapy. It is such a game changer when you pair that with hearing the voice of God, when you pair that with stewardship by the leading of the Holy Spirit and by the word of God. When you pair those things together, you are unstoppable, I promise you. And so coupling therapy with what God was doing in my world and in my life this year really taught me that every decision I make, it glorifies God when I am stewarding my emotions or my relational or emotional intelligence in a way that glorifies God. It glorifies God if I make decisions that put Him first and put Him in me first. Um, it glorifies God when I make decisions that aren't pleasing to the other person but crush me internally to make. And for a long time I couldn't believe that God was good because I was making decisions that hurt me but pleased other people. They didn't even necessarily glorify God, but they pleased the other person felt left that decision I made feeling liberated, feeling free, feeling like whatever they did was okay. And because of that, it was creating this world where it was like I only lived for other people or I only lived for what pleased other people. And learning to make decisions this year where it was like, no, it has to be pleasing to God. That's my priority, and pleasing internally for me. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I need to be my safest environment after God. I can't create a soft landing or create a safe space for other people that I haven't really experienced for myself, right? And so this year has taught me I've had to make a lot of hard decisions and have a lot of hard conversations and confront things that were once okay. It's been really hard to stare people in the face and have conversations where they're saying like, but this has always been okay with you, so why is it different now? And I've had to say, because I'm making different decisions to have a better life. Like that's my only answer. And so I would encourage you, um let's go down into the root of your decision making and find the real reason behind the decisions that we make, because our decisions are worship to God if they are done in a way that glorify Him, in a way that put Him first, in a way that make His voice our priority. So yeah, my decision making is worship to God. And the decisions that I make led by the Spirit of God, not ignoring what I'm seeing in order to live my life. Like if God shows me something, if God shares something with me, it's okay to be led by His Spirit. And that's my reasoning behind why I'm going to push through and follow through this decision. It doesn't need to please anybody else. It doesn't need to please anything else. It doesn't need to mirror what has already been done because it's always been done that way. Well, this is the way God told me, and that's that. The only people I'm accountable to are the people that God has placed in my life as accountability, as leadership, as disciplers. And those people know who they are, and those are people that know that they can question decisions I'm making, and what did God actually say, and what how are you following the instruction that God gave you. There are people that hold me accountable for that, but outside of that realm of accountability, there really isn't any other reason why my decision making about the life that God gave me needs to be run by anybody else. Or any No relationship is more important than my relationship with God and my relationship with self. And so yeah, I'm learning um the scripture, love your neighbor as you love yourself, in its correct context. And I'm learning that through my decision making, and that's been one faith lesson this year. And I would encourage you, if there is any any place in your life where you find that your decision making isn't in a way that glorifies God, and sometimes it's seemingly um it might be seemingly right to make your decisions in a way that please people, because we're called to be kind and we're called to do this and that. But look at it contextually. If it's causing you to put people first, then it's causing you to create idols in the heart, um that you make your decisions based on these idols rather than what God actually wants for you. Now, you may get called the black sheep, you may get called disrespectful, you may get called a ton of other things. Um, but the aim is that my decision making glorifies God and it is in the right context. So let me move on, because I could honestly harp on all that I've learned in under that umbrella for the entire episode on its own. But I think principle number two, which I mentioned earlier, is that um, life can life. Oh, I've never seen anything like it. I have, but like over the course of my, like I say, I laugh all the time and I joke with like my family and friends. Like, if people heard my life story, I've made therapists cry by just telling them my story. I've had friends listen and be gobsmacked at the fact that I am who I am, or I am the way I am. Because life has lived, honestly, and 2022 has been the greatest reminder that life can really life. It knows and understands its assignment. Okay. Um, and because of that, I have vowed, like we've spoken about internal vows on the podcast before, and if you haven't, go back and listen to some of our episodes concerning it. But I was prone, because of trauma, to making internal vows that were negative or horrible or bad. I would say I would never speak about this again. I would never do this again. I would never love somebody this way again. I would never be vulnerable with someone again. All of these kind of things, right? And I vowed to God that I would start to make better vows, vows that glorified him. This is all part of the changing my decision making process, right? And so one of the vows that I made to God this year is that I will never lose the tenderness of my heart. Everyone who knows me knows, yeah, like I'm tough, thick, very thuggish at heart. Do you know what I'm saying? It's the South London in me, please. But I but behind all of that is a real softie. Like, the people that know me. And I'm grateful that they know me as well as they do. But behind that is a really soft heart. And I've always taken joy in the fact that I can be a safe place, a soft place to land for the people that I care about the most, right? um, and it's a superpower. And because of that, that God gave me, He built me with this heart, and I never want to lose the tenderness of it. I want to guard it, I want to protect it, I want to nurture it, I want it to flourish, but I never want it to become hard or bitter or resentful or angry and remain that way. Like, I don't want to get old and be miserable and look back on life and see the point where my heart stopped being tender. And I never want to lose the tenderness of my heart. And life has lifed this year. When I tell you, I have fought, contended, battled with becoming hard-hearted and bitter. um it has been the biggest fight for me this year, but one thing I'm grateful for is that I won. Yeah, I had the victory. I am a conqueror. I've been a champion by God's grace and God's grace alone. Let me tell you that much. But this year I've not lost the tenderness of my heart, and that is a win to me. Even if 2022 didn't give me anything else, um, this was the year that I won. I knew that anything could come up against me and I would not lose the tenderness of my heart. And I would encourage you as well, when we go through this faith journey, it takes it can take one life-changing thing to happen for your heart to flip the switch and for you to say, you know what, God, you, faith, believing in you, pursuing Christ likeness, all of this stuff is really hard, it's really tasking, and it will really challenge me because it's not really attractive to my heart right now to invest in this. But choose that. Choose life, please. Choose life, because in choosing salvation, in choosing um to continue to pursue God, and choosing tenderness of heart over bitterness and resentment and hate and all of the things that can creep up to make your heart kind of concrete um against the world and against life. Please choose tenderheartedness, because honestly, life without a tender heart, life without light or joy, is not one that's enjoyable. It's not one worth living. It's not one that um it's not one that can cause you to thrive. It's not one that can cause you to wake up every day with a renewed sense of living. And that's what I pray the most for everybody that watches and listens and shares this and things like that. I pray that the joy of the Lord truly is your strength, not in a Christianese way, or in a highly like spiritual way, but truly that the joy of the Lord would be your strength to endure, to fight, to survive, and more than that, even to go a step further, to receive your joy in its full capacity back again, to receive your peace, your comfort in its full capacity again. Um, and yeah, don't lose the tenderness of your heart, or whatever your superpower is, whatever the unique gifting that God gave you is. Do not lose it. Do not lose it because of how life is lifing, or how you or attacks, or things that you feel like, things that are going on in your world. Do not lose the unique thing that God gave you, um to live with and to minister to people to, and to be a world changer with. Don't lose it. Whatever, and this is coming from someone who has lived enough life, and who has lived even three lives enough to tell you it's possible to still win. It's possible to still have your heart, to still have your mind, to still have your open arms. It's possible to have it all, even after um real tragedy and disappointment and life. So yeah, principle number 2 is keep the tenderness of your heart, or keep the joy of whatever superpower it is that God has given you. Yeah, lesson number 3, let's go right into that, is that faith faith will increase even in stages where you are struggling with your faith. Faith can increase in any environment. Faith can grow in wilderness seasons of your life. Faith can grow in spaces and places where you aren't able necessarily to increase faith by the typical mechanisms of studying, of worshiping. And I'm not saying that we don't need to practice these spiritual disciplines, but faith can increase even in tragedy. Faith can increase in dark places. And I think that for the longest time, we've thought that the only way faith can grow is by certain formulas. Yes, there are principles for faith to grow, but your faith can be increased by seeing God at work in your life, even in dark spaces. And one of the things that I've been testing myself to do more is to listen to testimonies. Sometimes I'll have people talking about their lives or what's going on in their world, not necessarily because I need to know what you're going through or what's happening, but it's because I'm teaching my faith to increase in any environment. That was a really hard decision to make, because that isn't my natural first response. So what I'm naturally used to is like something happens, my faith takes a hit. I wait until I've felt enough, and I try to do the recovery work. But what I'm teaching my faith to do now is to be resilient enough to withstand while tragedy is happening. And obviously no one prays for tragedy, no one prays for bad things to happen, but I've seen enough life to also know that bad things do happen, and sometimes they can happen to good people, and sometimes they happen to bad people, and sometimes they just happen anyway. Do you know what I'm saying? And so um one thing that I'm teaching myself to do now is build my faith to a place where it is resilient enough to withstand even in tragedy, even in disappointment, even when my expectation wasn't met, or even when I feel like God didn't answer my prayer the way I wanted it to happen. I believe that my faith can increase even in those spaces and places. And so I'm teaching it to. In the hardest points of this year where I've not been able to get out of bed, where I've cried myself to sleep, whatever the case has been, I've looked for a way, and I am still teaching myself. I'm not perfect. I know sometimes we can have these conversations and people can put you on a pedestal because you're saying something that they aspire to do. This is something that I am still mastering, that I am still learning. um when it's going on, I've cried myself to worship music. I have um cried myself into reading promises from scripture that I now thought were null and void because what I prayed for didn't happen, right? And so it's a thing of teaching my faith to be resilient in the midst of, rather than as a recovery action. And yeah, I've learned so much through that process. I've learned that my faith wasn't as strong as I had thought it was, even though we were going through season 4 and we were talking about living in faith and things like that. I realized that the principles out those principles that I was teaching, I was living in, but I would have to put into practice in a much harder season of life. And so yeah, I these are some of the things, but these are the main things that I think really help in increasing faith, especially after such a year as 2022. The first thing was that my decisions are worship to God. My decision making is worship to God. So be sober minded and be led by the Spirit. Um, and always choose the way that glorifies God. Principle number 2 is that don't lose your superpower or the unique gifting God has given you because of life and what can happen, but keep those superpowers, make new vows to yourself about what God has given you as a person to navigate with. And then principle number 3, which is to increase faith in every season. Let it be like a tree planted by rivers of living water. And yeah, like let your faith grow in every season, in each season, in the right season, in the right way, with the right things. But yeah, yeah, I could have gone I don't want to overload you with things that I've learned this year. But these are my 3 main things, and I above all, like, ponder upon these things, seek out in your own life where you need to make better decisions, where you need to make new vows or better vows to God, and to yourself. Seek out ways that you can even increase your faith in the year 2023. And don't forget to write your prophetic word, to listen out, fast, pray, seek God for what he has to say about your new year and about your life and about your personhood, and your relationship with him. But and also plan for your year, write goals, write timelines, write things down that God has shared with you, instructions that he's given you to pursue in 2023. If you don't have the Recalibrate workbook, then make sure you go and grab that at www.recalibrateuk.com. And or listen to some of the episodes that we've done as well, and just kind of recalibrate yourself, center yourself. This is what this is about. Recalibrate yourself, center yourself for the new year. And yes, I'm wishing you all a prosperous and excellent and mind-blowing 2023. So happy new year in advance. I love you all. And I will see you all soon with season 5. We are locked and loaded, and we are going to be talking about discipleship and stewardship of our lives as believers. And I'm so excited to be back with you on a weekly basis. So make sure that you're subscribed, make sure you're liking, you're commenting, you're sharing, and you're getting your community in on all the conversations that we'll be having. I love you, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.